After 28 years of marriage, I overheard my wife laughing with her sister on speakerphone. She said, "He still thinks I married him for love. He was just a stepping stone till Mark came back." That night, I didn't say a word. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Sam Bennett from Florida. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think stability was its own kind of love. Not the roses and candlelight kind, but the quieter sort. Bills paid on time. The smell of her coffee before my alarm even buzzed. The way she always reached for my hand at the grocery store without saying a word. I was Jack McCarthy. Husband. Father. Spreadsheet guy. The man who filed taxes early and remembered to rotate the tires. After 28 years, I knew the rhythms of our home better than I knew myself. Every creak in the hallway, every sigh from Linda's side of the bed, every routine Wednesday dinner. And in my own mind, I thought that was enough. That being the man who never left was the same as being the man she truly wanted. I told myself that for nearly 3 decades, until I overheard the truth, raw and reckless, floating through the hallway one unremarkable Thursday evening. Linda had always been chatty when she was with her sister, Marcy. That night was no different. I'd just come in from sweeping the porch, the sun fading low across the top of the hedges, and I remember the way her laugh carried. Light, almost girlish. I paused outside the kitchen doorway, not eavesdropping exactly, just lingering like I always did. And there it was, clear as crystal. He still thinks I married him for love. He was just a stepping stone till Mark came back. A beat of silence followed. Then both women burst into laughter, that cruel, snorting kind only sisters seemed to get away with. My heart didn't drop. It calcified, froze mid-beat like it forgot how to work. I didn't say anything that night. Didn't slam a door, didn't confront her. I just walked quietly past the doorway, muttered something about the garbage cans, and locked myself in the downstairs bathroom. I sat on the closed toilet for nearly an hour, hands folded between my knees, staring at the floor tile I had laid myself 15 years ago, grout lines still sharp, still perfect. My stomach was tight, but not from rage, from shame, that I'd been living in a delusion, fat and happy in a house built on false promises. Linda came in later like nothing happened, brushing her teeth, asking about the HOA meeting, and I nodded through it, watching her mouth move in the mirror like it belonged to someone else. I don't know what hurt more, that she said it or that she was so casual about it. The next morning, I got up at 5, like I always did, made coffee, packed a bagel for work, and instead of heading to the office, I drove to a parking lot 2 blocks away and started making calls. First to Frank, an old friend from my precinct days, now retired and spending his mornings fly fishing. He still had connections. "You need a PI?" he asked, no judgment in his voice. "Yeah," I said, quiet and thorough. By noon I had a name. By 3, I had a meeting. I told Linda I was working late. She barely looked up from her tablet. That night, I sat in a stranger's office while he clicked through a laptop, taking notes on everything I remembered, dates, suspicions, names. "You think she's seeing him again?" he asked. "I think she never stopped," I said. And even then, I was surprised how steady my voice sounded. Days turned into weeks, and I played my role with Oscar-worthy precision. I still kissed her forehead in the morning, still asked how her Pilates class went. But beneath the surface, I was moving pieces like a man planning his escape from prison. I checked our bank statements late at night. Noticed transfers, old credit card charges I never questioned before. I started collecting receipts, screenshots, anything that could be used later. I met with an attorney discreetly, learning the ways to protect myself, to tighten the financial seams. It wasn't vengeance. It was clarity. Pure, brutal clarity. If I had been a stepping stone, fine, but I'd be damned if she'd still be standing on my back by the time this was done. She made it easy. Mark wasn't some mystery man. He was her college flame, the one that got away, or, more accurately, the one who came sniffing back around every 5 years, just long enough to stir the pot. I remembered him showing up at our 10-year anniversary party. Linda's eyes lit up like he was her favorite song on the radio. I told myself then it was harmless, that I was being insecure. But that laughter with her sister? That shattered any illusion I'd built. She had waited on a man who never stayed. And I had been the couch she sat on until he did. One night, about 3 weeks in, I sat across from her at dinner. Pot roast, her specialty, and I watched her laugh at something on her phone. Probably Marcy again. And it hit me that I didn't know who this woman really was. I had loved a version of her that maybe never even existed. I stabbed my fork into a carrot and asked, "You ever think about what life would have been like if you married Mark?" She blinked, surprised. "Mark? God, no. He's a disaster." She chuckled and shook her head. "You're the only man I've ever trusted with my future." It was a lie. I could see it in the way her eyes didn't meet mine. But I smiled anyway. "Good," I said. "Just wondering." That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed beside her, listening to her breathing, wondering how many times she'd rehearsed that line, wondering how many times I'd swallowed them. I kept waking up before the alarm, not from nerves exactly, but from something sharper, more surgical. Focus. That's what it was. The kind of clarity that cuts through the fog of routine like a scalpel. I'd spent years sleepwalking through my own marriage, brushing my teeth beside a stranger, making love to someone who saw me as a utility, a placeholder. But now, every morning came with a mission. The first thing I did each day was check the progress report from the private investigator. Well, a wiry man with a quiet voice and eyes like a hawk. He didn't waste time on theories. He sent facts, photos, timestamps, phone logs, hotel bills, a printed invoice from a seafood restaurant 2 towns over where Linda had ordered wine and shared dessert with a man I used to shake hands with at cookouts. Mark, my ghost rival, now flesh and blood. I kept everything in a black binder I hid in my tool chest behind the pliers and socket wrenches. It felt appropriate somehow. Burying the evidence in a place Linda never ventured. I couldn't believe how much of her life I'd missed. Or ignored. That was the bitter pill. The realization that some part of me had known for years, had chosen not to look too closely, because facing the truth would have meant tearing down the only thing I'd built that looked like stability. I wasn't just grieving the betrayal. I was grieving the part of myself that had bought into the lie. I'd worked 2 jobs in the early years, refinanced the house twice, sold my motorcycle to help pay for Anna's college tuition. And all the while, I thought I was doing it for us. But there was no us. Just me, and a woman waiting for someone else. One Saturday morning, Linda hummed while folding laundry, chatting about a new couple who'd moved in down the street. "They're from Denver," she said. "Really sweet. She's a yoga instructor, and he's a software engineer." I nodded, pretending to listen, but all I could think about was the receipt I'd seen the night before. 2 glasses of wine, grilled scallops, and a slice of lemon tart, all signed by Mark's name, charged to a card that had once been under our joint account before she quietly moved the funds. She'd used my labor, my faith, to finance her lies. That's when it shifted inside me. The anger wasn't explosive. It was cold, dense, like lead poured into my chest. I started preparing the legal side next. I met with a divorce attorney named Carolyn, sharp as a tack, no nonsense, with a voice like sandpaper and steel. I liked her immediately. "You don't want revenge," she said after I laid out the binder. "You want freedom." I nodded. "Then let's play this smart," she added. Over the next 10 days, we mapped it all out. Asset transfers, ownership claims, a financial shell game that left me with the house, the retirement accounts, and everything Linda had grown too complacent to question. I changed beneficiaries, moved funds, and began documenting every interaction. Not once did I raise my voice. I couldn't afford the theatrics. I needed precision. Frank came over one evening, sat on my back porch with a 6-pack, and didn't say much at first. He was the only person I'd confided in. The only one who wouldn't try to convince me to talk it out, pray on it, or forgive her in the name of decency. "You sure about this, Jack?" he asked finally. "There's no coming back." I took a long sip of beer before answering. She made that choice for both of us when she laughed about me like I was a damn fool. He nodded slowly. "Then make it count." He left me with a single name, someone who could help me move a few final assets quietly. In the middle of this, Anna came home for a visit. She'd just graduated from law school, all pride and nerves bundled into a young woman who still called me Daddy when she forgot herself. I tried to keep things normal. Grilled steaks, movie night, even took her to the old lake where we used to fish when she was little. But she noticed. "You're off," she said one night, eyes narrow. "Everything okay with you and Mom?" I paused, searching her face for the right response. She looked so much like Linda in the eyes it made me hesitate. "Just tired," I said. "Work's been a lot." She didn't push, but her gaze lingered. The irony is, Linda seemed happier than she had in months. Smiling more, cooking new recipes. She thought I was mellowing with age. I wasn't. I was disassociating, pulling myself out of the narrative so I could rebuild it without her. And yet, there were moments, brief, disorienting moments, when I missed her. Or rather, missed the version of her I used to believe in. One night we sat on the porch drinking iced tea like old times. She touched my arm and said, "I've always felt safe with you, Jack." I looked at her and almost said, "Then why didn't you stay loyal?" But I just nodded. Let her hold onto her illusions. The truth would be hers soon enough. The last piece came into play when I discovered the old joint checking account had been closed. Linda never told me. She'd opened a new one in her name only and moved half the balance over. That was the final nail. I called Carolyn the next morning and said, "It's time." She began filing the paperwork. Quietly, strategically. We would serve her only after I secured the house deed fully in my name. Linda thought we were just refinancing. I watched her sign those documents with a little flutter of excitement in her voice, talking about putting in new tile for the kitchen. I just smiled, handed her a pen, and let her sign her share away. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. There was nothing left to prepare. The pieces were all in place. I had the truth, the plan, and the patience. And Linda? She was still humming in the kitchen, still living in a dream where I didn't know she'd never really loved me. She was about to wake up. The day the house became mine, it rained like hell. Sheets of water slapping against the windows, gutters overflowing, and the driveway slick with runoff. Linda hated the rain, said it made her feel trapped. I, on the other hand, welcomed it. There was something about the way a downpour stripped everything bare, no disguises, no filters. Just raw weather, unapologetic and unrelenting. Fitting, really, because under the surface of that storm, the final pieces of my plan were snapping into place. Carolyn had sent the paperwork that morning. The house deed was now solely under my name. The financials locked, and the motion for separation had been filed. All that remained was the confrontation, unavoidable now, and closer than ever. Linda had no clue. None. She floated around the house humming again, fussing with curtains she hadn't cared about in years, rearranging vases like she was nesting. Maybe some subconscious part of her sensed something shifting, but she said nothing. Instead, she came into the living room that evening holding 2 mugs of tea and said, "You've been different lately." Calmer. I looked at her then, really looked at her. This woman I had spent more than half my life with. She wore her hair up, her favorite lavender sweater on, the one I bought her for our 15th anniversary. She smiled at me like we were still that couple, still whole. It was almost impressive how easily she lied to herself. "Just focusing on the important stuff," I said. She nodded, completely unaware that she was about to lose everything. The PI sent me one final update that night. A photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Linda in her gym clothes, slipping into Mark's car. A red BMW with dealer plates. They drove to a hotel just off Route 38. The timestamp was 3:12 p.m. I stared at the image for a long time, not out of shock. I was well past that, but because of how ordinary it looked. No drama, no guilt, just 2 people picking up where they left off, as if the last 3 decades of my life had just been a speed bump in their love story. My hands didn't shake. I didn't punch a wall. I just quietly clicked save, printed the photo, and slipped it into the binder under a fresh tab labeled Final Nail. The following morning, I sat at the breakfast table watching her scroll through her phone, a faint smile playing on her lips. She was probably texting him. The image of it used to burn. Now it just hardened me. I'm thinking we should go to the cabin this fall, she said without looking up. Just you and me. Like we used to. I stared at her. The audacity. Yeah, I said finally. That sounds like a great idea. I took a sip of coffee and almost laughed. The gall it must take to sleep with another man and still talk about romantic getaways with the husband you no longer love. But even as I hardened myself, I wasn't immune to the weight of it. I'd spent decades protecting this woman, honoring her, holding space for her dreams, even the ones she never dared say out loud. And now I was watching her collapse into someone unrecognizable. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was realizing I never had her to begin with. The intimacy I thought we shared had been one-sided. Every sacrifice I made had been unreciprocated. I had been her provider, her rock, but never her heart. I confided in Frank again that night. He came by with a pizza and a six-pack, same as before, and we sat in the garage with the door cracked, watching the rain ease into mist. She thinks we're going to the cabin, I said. He raised an eyebrow. You tell her yet? I shook my head. Tomorrow. He was quiet for a moment, then leaned back in the folding chair. You gonna show her the pictures? I nodded. I want her to see what I see. No more pretending. He exhaled slowly. Just be ready, Jack. People like her. When you pull the rug out, they don't fall quiet. They claw. I knew he was right. I was bracing for it. That night, Linda walked into the bedroom wearing the old robe I'd bought her in Charleston. She curled up beside me, laid her head on my shoulder. I don't say it enough, she whispered, but I appreciate everything you do. Her voice trembled slightly, like part of her did know. But I didn't respond. I just stared at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come. It didn't. My chest ached, not from sadness, but from the pressure of carrying so much truth in silence. I wasn't being noble. I was being strategic. And in the morning, the mask would come off for both of us. The next day was a Tuesday, unremarkable to anyone else. But to me, it was the finish line. Carolyn called to confirm the filing. The documents were ready to serve. And Linda? She was in the kitchen making pancakes, humming to herself. I stood in the doorway, watching her like I was watching a stranger break into my house and make themselves comfortable. You got a minute? I asked. She turned, spatula in hand, face still soft. Sure, what's up? I held up the manila envelope. This is for you. She wiped her hands on a towel, took it, and started reading. I watched the color drain from her face like someone pulling a plug. Jack, what is this? It's everything you've earned, I said flatly, and everything you've already thrown away. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. Don't lie. Not again. I know about Mark. I know about the hotel. The credit cards. The stepping stone conversation with Marcy. I know everything. Her face twisted. Anger, confusion, fear, all crashing together. Jack, wait. But I was already walking away. You can stay with your sister until you figure things out, I said over my shoulder. You're not staying here. Not anymore. I'd always thought of anger as something loud, shouting, doors slamming, fists through drywall. But real anger, the kind that's aged and fermented over years, it's quieter. It's surgical. It knows where to cut and doesn't hesitate. That's the kind of anger I carried as I watched Linda fumble through the divorce papers in the kitchen, the manila envelope trembling in her hands. Her lips moved without sound at first, eyes darting between paragraphs, trying to find a loophole, an escape clause, some mistake that might undo what she'd never thought possible. Then she looked up at me like she didn't recognize me. Jack, she breathed, what are you doing? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, not angry in the traditional sense. Just done. I'm doing what you should have done years ago. I'm choosing honesty. Her mouth opened again, probably to deny it all, to spin some half-believable tale about how I misunderstood, how the pictures weren't what they looked like. But I held up a finger. Don't, I said calmly. Don't insult both of us. I pulled the binder from the drawer beneath the microwave, the one with the receipts, hotel invoices, credit card logs, and the grainy photos of her with Mark. I laid it on the table with a deliberate motion, then pushed it toward her. Start with tab 3, I said. That's the one from last week. She didn't touch it, just stared at the cover like it might explode. You went through my accounts? Her voice was rising now, hysteria creeping in around the edges. You spied on me? I laughed, quiet, bitter. You called me a stepping stone, I said. You think you get to be offended? Her eyes filled then, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I married. Not the manipulator, not the liar, but the young girl I met in college. Terrified, cornered. But it passed. I knew better now. Her tears weren't for me. They were for her comfort, her image, her control. It wasn't what you think, she whispered. It never meant. It meant enough to sneak around. I interrupted. Enough to reopen a door you promised was shut. You stayed married to me for stability. I was your insurance policy. I stepped closer. Well, congratulations. Policy's been canceled. She clutched the counter, the color drained from her face. Please, she said, and her voice cracked. Don't do this. We can fix it. I was confused. I didn't know he was going to come back around, and that's the thing. I snapped. You were waiting for him. This whole time. I was plan B. You made a home with me, built a life with me, while holding a candle for someone else. My voice stayed low, but the venom in it was unmistakable. She fell into a chair, looking small, defeated. It was stupid, she said, softer now. I got lost. Mark is a fantasy, Jack. You're the one who's real. I let the silence hang there for a moment. You're right, I said. I am real, and I deserve someone who chooses me. Every day, not someone who's just biding time. She started to sob then, loud, ugly sobs that echoed through the kitchen. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the sound of her laughter that night on the phone with her sister. That dismissive, mocking sound. You can stay with Marcy, I said flatly. Take whatever you can carry. The rest stays. The move was swift. She packed that night, bags thumping down the stairs like punctuation marks on the end of a crumbling sentence. I didn't help. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the clouds roll over the moon. Frank offered to come by, but I declined. Some moments you have to own in solitude. Around midnight, she stood at the doorway, suitcase in hand, face streaked with tears and mascara. You're really kicking me out? She whispered. After everything? I stood slowly, walked toward her, and met her eyes one last time. After everything, I said, this is the kindest thing I could do. You don't have to pretend anymore. She didn't respond, just nodded, turned, and left. The door clicked behind her, gentle, final. I locked it. Then I leaned my back against the wood and exhaled a breath I'd been holding for 28 years. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. No deception hiding in corners. No waiting for another shoe to drop. Just stillness. I walked through the house slowly after that, room by room, touching the back of chairs, the mantel, the edge of the dining table, claiming it, not as a husband scorned, but as a man finally awake. The next morning, Linda tried to call, then texted, then left a voicemail. I didn't listen. I blocked her number, then forwarded her attorney's contact to Carolyn. That was the deal now. All communication went through legal channels. I wasn't playing emotional games. She wanted to dance with ghosts. Let her do it somewhere else. I spent that Saturday fixing the sink in the guest bathroom and repainting the hallway upstairs. Not because it needed it, but because I needed it. Every brushstroke was a step forward. Every repair a declaration. I'm still here, and I'm rebuilding without you. Anna showed up unannounced a few days later. She'd heard something, probably from her aunt. She stormed in, eyes wide. What's going on? Mom's at Marcy's crying, and nobody's telling me anything. I sat her down, explained it all. Not the gory details, but enough. Her face twisted into disbelief, then anger. Are you sure? She asked. Dad, this is huge. I handed her the binder. Read it, I said. She didn't want to, but she did. And when she finished, she just sat there, blinking, stunned. She used you, she finally whispered. All these years, I nodded slowly. But not anymore. The first wave of fallout didn't come from Linda. It came from Marcy. 2 days after Linda moved in with her, I received a string of voicemails, each one angrier than the last. The first was performative, dripping with pity. Jack, I think you're making a huge mistake. Linda's been under a lot of stress. This thing with Mark. It wasn't serious. The second was venomous. How dare you throw her out like some stranger? You're not a saint, Jack. We all know you're cold. You're the reason she looked elsewhere. And the third was a mix of pride and threat. She'll be better off without you. Mark's already been reaching out. I didn't return any of them. I didn't need to. Let them twist the narrative however they wanted. I wasn't interested in winning a popularity contest. I was only interested in my peace and keeping what was mine. But Marcy wasn't content with just harassing my voicemail. She took it to social media. A vague post at first, something about men who pretend to be noble but are cruel behind closed doors. Then a more pointed one. After 28 years, a woman deserves more than to be discarded like garbage. Mutual friends started texting me, asking if everything was okay. Even the neighbors started whispering. Linda had spent years cultivating the image of a devoted wife, always smiling at block parties, always dropping off banana bread at the holidays. People liked her. But slowly, the whispers began to shift. Someone spotted her with Mark in the parking lot of that same hotel again, this time not hiding, just smiling like they'd never broken a rule in their lives. And that's when the tide began to turn. Anna, God bless her, handled it like a professional. She called me after seeing Marcy's posts. "Do you want me to say something?" she asked. "Because I will. That woman has no right." I told her no. Let people draw their own conclusions. We've got the truth on our side, I said. Let the lies burn themselves out. But a few days later, she posted anyway. Just one sentence. "My father is the kindest, most loyal man I've ever known, and anyone who questions that doesn't know the full story." The comments blew up. Half were supportive. The other half, predictably, circled back to Linda's defense. But it didn't matter. My daughter believed me. That was enough. Linda, meanwhile, wasn't faring as well. Mark didn't move in. He didn't propose. He didn't even commit. She'd bet her entire future on a man who'd already failed her once. And he did what men like him do. Flattered her, used her, and disappeared. Marcy told Anna, and Anna told me. "She's devastated," she said over the phone, her voice low. She thought he'd be there. But he's gone cold. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. All I felt was nothing. Just a kind of tired finality. Like watching a storm pass that you'd spent months preparing for. Linda made her bed. I wasn't going to rescue her from it. Still, the silence after the confrontation was heavy. There were moments when the house felt too quiet. Echoes in the hallway. A strange stillness in the bedroom. I started sleeping with the door cracked open, letting the hallway light spill in just enough to soften the edges. I wasn't lonely, not exactly, but I was adjusting. And with every passing day, that space, once filled with her presence, became more mine. I reorganized the kitchen, threw out the throw pillows she loved, repainted the den a deep navy blue. I cleared out the guest room and turned it into a music room, brought up my old guitar from the basement. For the first time in years, I played for no one but myself. Deb, my next-door neighbor, stopped by one afternoon. She was a widow in her early 60s, sharp-eyed and quick-witted. We'd always exchanged polite greetings, but never much more. This time, she brought banana bread, same as Linda used to do, and a quiet look of concern. "Heard some things," she said gently. "Thought you might need a little sugar in your life." I chuckled, let her in, and made coffee. We talked for over an hour. About nothing heavy. Books, weather, the ridiculous new HOA policy about mailbox paint. But just before she left, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, "people see what they want to see. But the truth has a funny way of sticking around." I nodded, appreciating the clarity in her eyes. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than you know." The next week, Linda sent a letter. Not through a lawyer, handwritten, in her familiar cursive. It was 5 pages long. A confession of sorts. She admitted to waiting for Mark, admitted that she'd let herself grow comfortable in a lie. "I wanted stability, Jack. And you gave me that. You gave me everything. I just didn't know how to appreciate it." She asked for forgiveness. Asked if we could talk. Not to fix anything, just to understand. I read it 3 times before folding it back into the envelope. Then I tucked it into the back of the binder and locked it away. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe I never would be. Some apologies come too late. Not because the words aren't sincere, but because the damage was done in silence, in smirks and secrets, not shouts. That Friday, I sat on the porch again, same chair, same blanket. Frank came by, handed me a cigar, and we lit up under a quiet sky. "She'll keep trying," he said. "You ready for that?" I nodded. "Let her try," I said. "The door's locked for a reason." He smiled, tapped ash into a plastic cup. "Proud of you, man." Most guys would have snapped. I didn't say anything at first, just watched the wind stir the branches. I wanted to, I said eventually. But I knew if I burned it all down, I'd be the villain in her story. This way, I'm just the man who left. And that was exactly who I was now. 2 months after Linda left, I walked into the hardware store for deck stain and came face to face with Mark. He stood in aisle 6, looking over a display of cordless drills, acting like a man with no enemies in the world. He saw me before I saw him, and when our eyes locked, he hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Enough for me to know he didn't expect to be held accountable. Men like Mark rarely do. They show up, disrupt lives, chase fantasy over commitment, then disappear the moment things become real. But I didn't walk away. I kept going, straight down the aisle, and stopped 3 feet from him. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat, and offered a weak smile. "Jack," he said, like we were old college friends. "Wasn't expecting to see you here." I stared at him, not blinking. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His clothes expensive but careless, like he'd dressed in a rush to impress someone and had already forgotten why. "I bet you weren't," I said calmly. He chuckled nervously. "Look, I don't know what Linda told you. You don't have to," I cut in. "I know enough. You were the fantasy. I was the insurance." He winced, but I wasn't done. "She waited for you, built a life with me while holding a door open for you in her mind. And you? You walked through it, played the part, then vanished." Again, he tried to interject, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to say thank you." He blinked. "Thank you?" "Yeah," I said and smiled. "You saved me from another decade of pretending. You made it impossible for her to keep lying. You gave me my life back." He didn't respond. Just stared at me like he wasn't sure if I was mocking him or genuinely grateful. I turned and walked away, the weight on my shoulders lighter than it had been in years. That was the last time I ever saw him. Back at the house, the seasons had started to shift. The air had a bite to it now, the leaves along the fence just beginning to burn orange and red. I spent more time outside, tending the lawn, fixing the back steps, building a new fire pit in the yard. Work that used to feel tedious now felt sacred. Each nail, each shovel of soil, a way to reclaim something that had been taken from me. Deb came by again, this time with apple muffins and a small potted plant. "Peace lily," she said, placing it on the porch rail. "They're tough. They bounce back even when you forget to water them for a while." I smiled and nodded. "Sounds like me." She stayed a while, sipping tea as we watched the sun drop behind the neighbor's rooftop. "Linda stopped by," she said after a long pause. "Looking for you." I didn't tell her anything. I nodded slowly. "She's still looking for closure. You gonna give it to her?" I exhaled through my nose. "I already did. She just doesn't recognize it." Deb gave a soft laugh, one of those sounds that said she understood more than she let on. "Well, for what it's worth, the neighborhood's quieter now. Cleaner, too." "Funny how that works," I replied. Linda sent one more letter in early October. This time, it was only a page. "I know you'll never let me back in," it read. "I know I lost the right to ask for that. But I wanted you to know I did love you. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I loved you in the only way I knew how." I sat with that line for hours. Not because I believed it, but because I needed to know I could read it and still feel nothing. And I did. The tether was gone. Whatever part of me had once needed her validation no longer existed. That night, I burned the letter in the fire pit and watched the ashes lift and scatter into the wind like bad dreams finally waking up. Anna came home for Thanksgiving. She hugged me longer than usual when she arrived, her eyes scanning the walls like they held new meaning. "The house feels different," she said. "Lighter." We cooked together, watched old movies, played Scrabble until midnight. For the first time since she was a kid, she asked about my life. Not just how I was doing, but what I wanted next. "You ever think about dating again?" she asked cautiously. I grinned. "I think about hiking again. That's enough for now." She nodded, satisfied. As long as you're happy. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman she was becoming, the loyalty in her eyes. I am, I said. For the first time in a long while, I really am. The porch became my sanctuary. Every evening I sat there with a cup of coffee or a glass of bourbon, watching the sun dip and the sky bruise into night. No more secrets. No more waiting. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the distant hum of life continuing without me having to hold it together for anyone else. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even grieving. I was simply aware of my own strength, my own silence, my own right to be chosen, not settled for. I was never a stepping stone. I was the damn foundation. And now, I was finally standing on my own. If this story hit home, if you've ever been the one quietly holding everything together while someone else waited for a different life, drop a comment. Tell us what part spoke to you. And if you've ever walked away from something that looked whole on the outside but was hollow at the core, let this be your reminder. Peace doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. Subscribe for more stories where silence ends and the truth begins. See you soon in the next story.